get Seton Hall playing today. You get
Yeah.
DePaul and Georgetown. The winner
Yeah.
gets Creighton. We get Jon Walker, the Omaha World-Herald, who is at Sbarro right now, getting himself the best slice of New York pizza. Good morning.
Hello. How are you guys?
Good. How's the Big Apple?
I'm actually not there yet.
Oh.
My flight is at noon today, so
Okay. Direct.
I'll get there in a little bit. It'll create a tricky situation because, as you guys might know, they're announcing Big East Player of the Year at 12:30. And if it's a certain someone and I'm in the air, that could be a problem.
You know what? Just have McEwen hit send on the story you've already written.
To say, Willie Moore can do
Oh,
something.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it'll be.
Okay, so I mean, we're talking about a guy that his name will always be mentioned in the same sentence as Patrick Ewing, which is absolutely incredible and a tribute to Kalkbrenner.
Yeah.
And like the AP came out with their Player of the Year, and it was not Kalkbrenner. But I think it's essentially, and we talked about this last week, down to two guys. What would be the reason if it's not Ryan Kalkbrenner as the Player of the Year this year?
The interesting thing was last year, and I promise this is going to wrap around to this year. The interesting thing was last year, the argument was for Tristan Newton was, okay, well, he's the best player on the best team. And sometimes that's good enough. Sometimes it's not. Last year it wasn't because Devin Carter was just that good for Providence. And in this year, R.J. Lewis has been the best player on the best team. He's hit clutch shot after clutch shot to help St. John's pull out these ugly games that they have no business winning. And to their credit, that they've won all season long. So that's kind of the argument for R.J. Lewis. His offense, obviously, him and Ryan Kalkbrenner, two different scorers, but their offensive outputs are somewhat similar. And so that's why the argument this year for me was, and I've said this for about 6 weeks now, if you have two guys whose offensive outputs are similar and their teams finished similarly in the standings. Now, obviously, St. John's kind of ran away with it at the end. And only one of those guys is in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Isn't that the better player?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the criteria I was working off of, but that would be the argument if it's not Ryan Kalkbrenner, is that R.J. Lewis was the best player on what was definitively the best team in the league this year, and St. John's wouldn't have been able to pull out some of those ugly ones if it weren't for R.J. Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, your argument is my argument. Ryan Kalkbrenner has averaged more points, more rebounds. Funny enough, they're very similar in assists to R.J. Lewis. His field goal percentage is 66%. Lewis's field goal percentage is 44%. Oh, Lewis has 2 turnovers a game. Kalkbrenner has 3 blocks a game. Yet, one of those guys is going to end up being the Big East. The wrong guy will be the Big East Player of the Year. Outside of that, John, let's talk about the tournament. Both tournaments. Right now, Creighton is kind of weirdly sitting in some brackets on that 9 line. That 20-point Xavier loss just really did not help them out, especially with the margin of victories and how much they go into being in the net ranking. And, they're kind of on the 8-9 line. I got a question for you here. Is it kind of the full, and I know you get this a lot, in terms of when we talk about these tournaments, it's almost as if they're going to be a 7 seed and play a 2 seed, they basically have to win the Big East Conference tournament. Is it kind of an all or nothing deal with Creighton in your perspective, where either, maybe just lose right away and rest up and get yourself really going before the tournament and get your legs under you, or the other alternative is just win the whole thing and put yourself at the 7? Is there a little bit of that contrast there for this team, considering where they sit in the NCAA tournament kind of seedings right now?
I don't know. Last year, we certainly had that argument. It was okay, you play 6 people. Last year, it was okay, you play 6 people. You need to either win the darn thing or lose and get your legs under you for what we knew a year ago was going to had the potential to be a special tournament run. They were going to be a high seed. They had Baylor and Trey and Ryan and Ashworth, and we knew it was going to be a special tournament run. When you're an 8-9, you have no clue what's going to happen, because regardless of what you go through the first day, you're going to play a 1 seed in the second round, and who knows what happens. Creighton's certainly capable of beating one, depending on which one, but those teams are 1 seeds for a reason.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the Big East tournament, like, I don't know if I confidently say it's as boom or bust as it was last year. They have a little bit more depth. Greg McDermott talked about that on Monday. They're kind of more equipped to handle a tournament setting, especially a conference tournament, than they were a year ago. So that'll help. But I don't know. Like, this team is really, like, they would either lose to Georgetown or DePaul if it was the bust. And that's not a good way to go into the NCAA tournament. Not that game, just like last year, not that the Big East tournament has any bearing on what you do in March Madness, but, like, that's not a good way to get your footing going into to the big dance. So no, I don't know if it's as boom or bust, but yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. To get to a 7 and get off the 8-9, you have to, probably win it. To get to an 8, to be able to wear a white jersey in the 8-9 matchup, you probably need to get to Saturday, because that would mean that you'd beat UConn, assumedly, along the way.
Yeah.
And I think UConn's sitting right on that 8 line, so they just flip in my mind.
Hey, something that Max said earlier this week that you just brought up, that, you go through so many stats and you're like, whoa, wow, ooh, that's not good. I think I looked this up and did the math. It is kind of surprising. We know that there are 2 plus 1 that get a majority of the minutes, but I think Creighton is either 3rd or 4th in the Big East in bench minutes, which at, like, looking at from afar, you'd be like, oh, that can't be true. That's kind of wild.
No, it is. And I was thinking about that the other day. It's a little bit of a few different things. Like, Greg McDermott has gone a lot deeper into his bench and trusted his bench a lot more than he has over the past couple of years. And maybe I shouldn't say trusted his bench. That's probably not fair, but it's so hard to, like, when you have Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander, and Ryan Kalkbrenner, and you take any one of those guys, let alone multiple, off the floor, there's a noticeable drop-off. Like, that just is how it is. And so last year it was like, okay, we can't take these guys out, not because we don't have people who can't play behind them, because, like, we can't afford to take them out. And there's a little bit more parity on the roster this year. Like, we know it's Ashworth, we know it's Kalkbrenner, and then, Jemiah's been that third guy, but that doesn't always mean he's scoring. Like, that could just mean he's following around Isaiah Coleman and scoring 5 points, and that would mean Jackson McAndrew has to chip in double digits, which he has the past couple of games. So it's not too shocking based on the outlook of this particular season, but it is shocking comparative to what Creighton and Greg McDermott usually like to do, and that's to tighten up the rotation to, I don't know, usually about 7, no more than 8 during Big East play, and they just couldn't do that this year.
So Jemiah Neal, when Creighton played Marquette, UConn, and St. John's back to back, had 14 points, 12 points, and 19 points. He basically closed out that Marquette game at the Chi. I mean, he was absolutely nails, especially at the end of that game. But to end the year against 4 teams that are obviously worse, DePaul, Xavier, Seton Hall, and Butler, he scored 5 points, 8 points, 4 points, and 10 points. Is this are you concerned that he has kind of slacked off that pace at the end of the year? Or are you kind of just counting on, when the games are the biggest and they're playing the best opponents, that's when Jemiah shows up?
Yeah, I think it's probably more of the latter. Now, the inconsistency of his highs have been, kind of the talking point all season. Like, I remember that going back to November, and then we did it again once Pop went down, and we did it again a month later. Like, that's just kind of been the thing. But again, like, he has found he has I don't think I have to tell anyone that, like, if some certain guys on this roster are not scoring, they're going to have a hard time getting on the floor. Like, that just kind of is the way it is. Jamiah Neal is not one of them because, in that same thing, if he's not scoring, okay, well, he's locking down the other team's best scorer. Maybe that's Jason Green on some night, but those two usually switch. Excuse me. Strong defensive assignments every night. So I don't think so. And yeah, Jamiah's just kind of turned it on when it's absolutely mattered most. In that Marquette game, dropped a career high 24 at UConn when Creighton needed it. And then this goes all the way back to November because they played that Notre Dame game at the Players Era Festival without Ryan Kalkbrenner, and he matched his career high with 22 points. Obviously, he broke that a few weeks later at UConn. But no, he's really just turned it on when the stage has been the biggest and the lights have been the brightest, and that's kind of going to be the case for every 40 minutes from here on out. The lights will get a little bit brighter and the stage a little bigger, and the season hanging in the balance.
Who would you take out Creighton out of this mix? Because there's a big game today at tomorrow at 1:30 that could put a fifth team into the tournament. The team you would not want to play right now at MSG would be who?
For Creighton, or just generally?
Well, you could,
right?
John, you could do both for Creighton, the way their bracket works, or anybody that is in the tournament.
I don't know anybody who wants to play Xavier right now.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't. Now, here's the problem, because I think Xavier is, and I don't even know if sleeper is correct, but like Xavier is the sleeper pick to win the Big East tournament. The problem is, guys, to do that, you're going to have to beat Marquette, which is, they can hang with Marquette. Then you're going to have to beat St. John's on Friday night at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck. And then in the championship game Saturday, in theory, you'd have to beat one of either, let's say, Villanova, Creighton, or UConn. So that's not a favorable path to do those 3 in 3 days. And then, so I wouldn't want to play Xavier if I was any team. And then Creighton specific, like, they do not want to play Villanova. They would much rather play UConn again, because I think they can sit and look and say, okay, we beat UConn in stores, and then it took Liam McNeely having one of the best games by any freshman in Big East history to beat us on our home floor. And I think they feel confident that they could keep McNeely from dropping 38 again, and that they could do the things they did elsewhere in both meetings with UConn. But Villanova really, really, really gives them matchup problems because of Eric Dixon's ability to, 1, space the floor, and then 2, put the ball on the floor and get to the rim. So they do not want to see Villanova. They'd much, much, much rather see UConn, which is weird to say.
So I talked about one guy who maybe didn't have the best end to the regular season, Jamiah Neal. Let's talk about one guy who had a great end to the regular season, Jackson McAndrew. Had 14 and 17 points respectfully in his last 2 games. But something that caught my eye, and it was a tweet that you sent out. I couldn't find the tweet, John, for whatever reason. Where Greg McDermott was talking about Jackson McAndrew's development as a defensive player, and that he could never imagine earlier in the year putting McAndrew in some really, really big moments. What have you seen from just the freshman's development as a really important defensive piece on this team?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Greg McDermott in September, like early September, right when they started camp. And we sat down for, I think, like half an hour just to talk about the roster and what he expected from guys and the outlook on their season, et cetera. And we got to the freshmen at the time. Obviously, Larry Johnson was included in that group, and he was excited about all 3 freshmen. But the one thing that he not knocked, but pointed out about Jackson McAndrew was that it was going to take some time for him to develop into a defender. And that was kind of the thing. It was like, is he going to compete for minutes early? And he said, if he defends. So that was kind of the biggest talking point when it came to Jackson McAndrew. And he is just in a different world as a defender now compared to where he was then. He's in a different world as a defender now compared to where he was in the middle of January.
Yeah.
And I think the really underrated thing, or the thing that maybe goes unnoticed, is like he has really developed a relationship with Ryan Kalkbrenner throughout this season. And that guy's a pretty good defender, I'd say. So I don't know. Maybe he
hot
picked up
take.
a few things along the way, but no, he's really just kind of he gambled a lot. Like he'd get beat and then try and swipe at a ball early in the year, and he's learned that in Creighton's system with the 7'1" center hanging around the rim, it's okay to get beat a little bit.
Yeah.
And you don't have to gamble as much to recover. So I really think he's just settled in and walled up, used his length, not left his feet untimely. He's left his feet on time and really just used his length. That's a pretty long wingspan. And he's used every bit of it to keep defenders or to keep scorers in front of him.
Safe travels out to MSG. Look forward to your coverage tomorrow night. Creighton plays at 6. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the food. Have fun.
Yeah.
So why can't every conference tournament be like the Big 12 and the Big East?
Where they're just really good?
Or fans, like, you spent time, down at, Hilton South with all the Iowa State fans. And now, you get another year to experience out at the Big East.
Yeah.
Like, I know conference tournaments are fun, and especially the mid-major ones, but it's like the Big East stands alone because of the arena and because of the history.
Right.
And then the Big 12 has gotten, such a great run down in Kansas City. I just wish there were more places, and maybe it's because those two just stay where they are that have become so special.
I think so. And they both, they both have history in a sense, like it's and then the location. Like it's easy to lure Kansas and K-State fans, and
sure.
Let's think back, guys. Like you could get Iowa State, Mizzou, Kansas State, Texas Tech. Like, yeah, of course we'll all drive up to Kansas City, no problem.
Yeah.
And then out in the Big East, it's like, well, that's St. John's home arena now, and you can take the train down from Stores, and so. No, that's been a big part of it. I wish more conference tournament kind of had that prestige, but I guess the Big 12 and Big East wouldn't be what they were if everyone had that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time as always. Enjoy the week, and we'll talk next week ahead of what will be another busy week for you on the road in the NCAA tournament.
Thanks, guys.
That's
Talk to you, Johnny.
Jon Walker. So there's Indianapolis.